Hi, I'm Bill, and that's Mike, and today we're going to introduce ourselves for our brand new podcast, Pop Culture Pausecast. Our first question for this podcast is, what are the most important things you need in a good game? What do you reckon, Mike?
Well, that is a very loaded question. I think when it comes to most important things in a game, it really depends on the game, because I'd like to consider myself as a very story-orientated person. Like when it comes to a JRPG, that's the only reason I'd want to play a JRPG, because I don't like the combat traditionally. But saying that, if you take the story out of a platformer, I honestly couldn't care less. But I think, like, when I think of a game I like Donkey Kong Country, as opposed to like a Mario, I think the reason why Donkey Kong speaks to me is something that JRPGs and story-oriented games do have, which is very important, which is atmosphere. I like every game to have this sort of vibe, this world that you sort of envelop. You don't want to feel like you're running through an obstacle course. You want to feel like you've escaped into a different world, whether that's for different planets in Mass Effect, or when it comes to like just hearing this, atmospheric music that's got like the sounds of crickets baked into it. Like again, Donkey Kong Country. I think games
a bit like you've left your living room and you've gone into a different world and you've forgotten you're in your living room playing a game.
Yeah, I think that's really important for me personally. It's almost like strong gameplay is great and it's very important. And games like Tony Hawk, I think, are key for that. But I think that is the biggest element. What about you, Bill?
Me will always be gameplay over everything else. If the game is playing itself, or if it's more suited, I felt, to a TV series or a movie, then I won't be as engaged as if the game says you won't be able to see all of what this game has to offer and the ending if you're not good at the game and the gameplay doesn't allow you to get good. So you've mentioned a few good ones there already, like Donkey Kong Country. Mario games are very much like that. Things that make you an interactive experience. That's what really matters to me. If I wanted to watch a movie, I would turn on a movie. If I wanted to read a book with all the text, I'd read a book. But there's something about the world of video games, that interactive media where everything comes together, but it's the gameplay at the forefront of it that really matters. I mean, there's other stuff, like you could argue there's a few games that would have solid gameplay, but they could be held down by not having cool characters. That's another thing about video games that really matter to me. If I'm not playing a character I think is particularly interesting, generic Army Guy 1 or Space Marine 2, then again that switches me off. So characters, and like you've said as well, music, all that well-being of things. But ultimately, if the gameplay isn't there, if I don't feel that I'm contributing to the experience, then it's lost and it's not a game for me anymore.
Yeah, I'd say music is surprisingly high on my list of needs. Like, change the music to a Mega Man or a big RPG like a Chrono Trigger. Like, you take that music element out, and I don't know, I feel like you're missing something. I think that's why the Mario games have almost never felt that way. I know everyone knows the whole overworld, bum 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 bum, but I've heard it remixed so many times. I've heard that so many times it's lost all luster. So now when I play like a Mega Man X, I feel energized, or when I play a Shovel Knight, I think music is such a key element that it's almost overlooked, especially nowadays.
Music's an interesting one, because I don't think, to answer the question that we've had here about the most important things, it certainly is up there. But for me, it will always be gameplay first. But music has this amazing power to put you back in a situation of where you were before. So music was, when the game's done, when you've mastered the gameplay, when you've got over the characters and saw their story all the way through, the thing that stays with you is the music. You can hear a music on someone's playlist or something, and it immediately goes, "Where's that from?" Oh, that's that thing. And for me, hearing a Mario Brothers theme takes me right back to the moment where I first learnt how to hold and play a controller. So that's why it doesn't matter to me that I hear the Mario theme over and over again, because it means something to me there. But I think with yourself, you didn't play Mario like straight away, did you? So
no, I didn't.
But you do get that stuff with Donkey Kong. Like you weren't. I can't imagine that your expectations for Donkey Kong Country were like huge compared to some of the ones that you've done on your channel. But the music is something that people often forget about the Donkey Kong Country series.
Well, I think the composer David Wise is probably in my top 5 like video game composers, because again with the the atmospheric quality, you listen to like aquatic ambience, the underwater music in the first game, and it almost like feels like the game is like, it's almost like it's punching its weight, it's like the music is like this beautiful, serene, atmospheric masterpiece, or equate it to a really attractive woman, and Donkey Kong is a monkey, it's like it's like, say, like the music is Pauline and Donkey Kong is Donkey Kong. It's kind of like, you know what I mean? It's like it's punching its weight. Like the music is just outstanding. I don't understand how it sort of. You're right though. Like bananas. I don't. Why is it so good?
I think it's because, like you say, it's that marriage of cool, quirky characters that are memorable, mixed in with fantastic gameplay, and that music is the cherry on top. But I think also music is a lost art these days, where people are more into realism and they want ambience and they want. Music sometimes takes away from the experience they feel, but they put music in movies for a reason. It's to build atmosphere and stuff. And we've lost a lot of those old games that people always talk about and replay on their playlist. Your Mega Mans, your Donkey Kongs, your Marios, your Sonics. All of those come from an era where they didn't have much to work with, and they used what they could within the world that they had. But yeah, ultimately, if the game doesn't play well, you can have the best music in the world, but that will still fall apart. You'd go, that's cool music, but I hate the game.
No, I know what you mean. I've played through like your Detroit Become Humans and your Telltale games, and I think now I've kind of become numb to like QTEs and stuff. Like if I have to, it's almost like I'd rather be playing the game myself. It's like not to go too deep into like spoiling and stuff, but like there's a moment in the 3rd Metal Gear Solid where you have to kill a certain character, and it's in a cutscene, but you have to like physically press the button on the controller that's associated with the fire button, and there's no prompt on screen. It literally like lingers on you, and as the player, so it's almost like you, the player, is carrying out that action. And I think that like a story in a game is important to me, but if you can really marriage those two things together seamlessly, then I think that just elevates a game onto a new level. Personally,
yeah, I think if you can, once you've got, for me, gameplay is locked in. You've got a cool character I want to play as that means something. It's not someone I'm going to get fed up of listening the voiceovers to, or he just looks so stupid that I was like, why would I ever want to play as this character ever, or whatever. And the music has landed. Then when you start bringing in and marrying in things like story and the interactiveness of it and all the mechanics and the HUD and the presentation, all of that is married into this incredible mixture, then you've got a winner. But ultimately, you can have all of that. And there's a few games on the list that we'll talk about in this very podcast at some time in the future. But if the gameplay isn't there, then you can have a massive orchestra of all those other things. But I will just go, it's not for me.
Yeah, no, I agree. I think that's what, for me at least, that's what elevates a fantastic RPG to like one that I just kind of like everyone. I think people say that genre in particular is one to play for the story, but if the game plays just like 50 random encounters in one dungeon, and it's just you're getting the gameplay is just repetitive, I think that does bring it down ultimately. So
So what? Let's shoot, shall we? Let's get to the point, because I think that's what we need to be in this podcast. Let's chuck out some examples. So I'll start, if you don't mind, my good friend Mike.
That's fine.
I do feel that sometimes games go on for too long because they've run out of gameplay mechanics, and you knock onto a good one there. It normally does come up for me in RPGs. RPGs, I think, if done well, they are incredible experiences that will stay with you forever. But every so often, there'll be a part in an RPG where it tends to be more of a question of pride that they do. It's not so much like I'd rather have a tight 20-hour RPG. They look at it and go, we can't sell a 20-hour RPG. It needs to be 50 hours. It needs to be 100. It needs to be 150 hours. It's not proper RPG otherwise.
Yeah.
So then they'll sacrifice elements of their game, mainly things like gameplay, where their battle system crumples under the weight of repetition because they need you to level up to level 70 to do the last boss. And they'll chuck in pointless fight after fight after fight to grind to just get past the next section because they want you to have that long clock on it. My argument for that is chuck in a new gameplay mechanic, make something in the gameplay that will make it worthwhile grinding, then you've got a game. But don't just do it because, I don't know, you just need a number on a clock.
Yeah, I think like a good example for me, I know this is I assume it's a game you've played, but there are full chunks of Final Fantasy VII Remake that you could just rip out, and I don't think that anything would have been missed. These aren't sections from the original that people love. These are like controlling a crane to help Aerith move around, or like, you know, there's one single picture, you know, one single screen in the original that becomes like a whole dungeon that takes it like a whole hour. And that just makes you think, if they were going to pad it out, like it's a 30-hour game, but you think, I'd much rather them strip that out and have the game end, say, like at calm. So say you have a final fight against Sephiroth in the calm flashback. That would be how I'd end it, and that would have been the perfect ending for me. But they just so many, and it's not just, it's almost a lot of the problems as well. And I think the original Final Fantasy VII suffers from it a little bit. It's variety for the sake of it. I think if you're going to have variety, it needs to be built on that core gameplay foundation. So you've got your core foundation of gameplay, and you build off of it. Because you spend 2 years working on one gameplay system, that's going to be the best gameplay system in the entire game. So then, whilst you're working on this, if you spend a month working on this little mini game, that's not going to be very interesting compared to the fully fleshed out, you know, core of the gameplay. So I think,
why have a game with 50 different mini games in it that does 50 mini games poorly, when you could just play 50 separate games that all do those gameplays much, much better?
Because I've only ever, there's only one game I've ever played that's been a different game every minute that I've actually thought was fantastic, which was It Takes Two.
I still haven't played that.
That is definitely the exception. Definitely.
Yeah, I need to play that. But you see, then there's so I agree with you with Final Fantasy. It was a bit later for me for the remake of Final Fantasy VII when you go into the laboratories.
Oh, that went on for ever,
far too long. But you see, I didn't have a problem with the battle system in that. The battle system in Final Fantasy VII remake I thought was in depth enough to carry the majority of the game. What the problem was for me is navigating the level structure.
Oh yeah, it was too.
If it wasn't, if they had more gameplay in the way you navigated the maps, then it would have been more interesting. Rather than walk up to button, press button, see red 13, run across a wall, and activate a bridge so you can carry on walking. That is where the gameplay suffered, and the laborious kind of repetitive nature comes in. I get that, and we will disagree on this one. I get that a lot with Metal Gear Solid games as well,
right?
Where the gameplay is sacrificed in places for a long cutscene to build emotion. The biggest one and the easiest one for me to lay up, Mike, is where you have Otocon's sister, and you're escorting her underwater, and it makes you feel vulnerable. I get that. I understand that. But it doesn't make the gameplay fun when she needs to keep coming up for air and you need to pick her up and carry her because she's too scared and she's, it strips back all the espionage parts about what that should be like, and instead gives you this kind of wart on your back just for no other reason but story. And that's the kind of stuff I think you shouldn't do. And Grand Theft Auto, which is another one, I think we just lost all of our audience with the 3 games I've just mentioned. But Grand Theft Auto is another one for me where I completely understand why people love that game, because if you're going to buy one game in your life that's got so much stuff in it, why wouldn't you want to spend 50, 60 pounds and get so much in one game?
Yeah, of course.
But at the same time, it's not a great racing game. It's not a great shooting game. It's not a good golf game. It's not a good gambling game. It's not a good of any of these things. It's just all the variety in one.
Yeah.
I would rather have separate games that do them all really, really well than one game that has them all in together and it's all a bit janky.
Yeah, I mean, I'd probably disagree with Grand Theft Auto more because, like, just it's its own little experience. But I think with Metal Gear Solid, I'm not going to disagree with you. I think it's a case of if you've got like X amount of dialogue that you want to sort of have come across, that's fine. But then you have to also, like you said, sort of have the gameplay to, like, I think, like, there's a part in Metal Gear Solid 1 where you have these card keys that you have to have at different temperatures and stuff. Yes. And because there's a certain amount of dialogue that needs to be let out, so basically you're running back and forth so that they can use, say these admittedly important story stuff. But at that point, I'd rather have another, even if they weren't like outstanding, but another like 3 or 4 rooms of like stealth gameplay instead of having to run back and forth in rooms that I'd already been in.
I'll give you an example. For our first versus Metal Gear versus Resident Evil, right?
Right.
So in Metal Gear, that's a great, and this I understand we haven't got time to go into depth on this, but Metal Gear, when you've got those card keys and you're running around, and really all you do is you just get the card key and you sprint to one location, change the temperature, and then go on to another one.
Yeah.
There's a small section in Resident Evil 1 Remake, which is very small, and they could have done it for longer, but they understood it could have annoyed people, where likewise you pick up, I think it's some sort of bomb, where if you run, it detonates and you die instantly.
Yeah, no, I remember.
And you're filled with, it's filled with these new monsters that can kill you in one hit, and they come down from the ceiling and they're all over the place.
Yeah.
You immediately pick this thing up and you think, I can't run. I've gone the entire game, and now I have to walk several screens to get to drop this key off.
Yeah.
And I can't run away from the monsters. That is a gameplay mechanic where it tests your resources, it tests how well you know the game now, and it tests your nerve of how you get past this next part. Whereas I feel the key card part in Metal Gear was more of a kind of a story mechanic where you pick up the key, you run, and then you're rewarded with a giant cutscene to explain, oh, you've managed to do this thing.
Yeah.
It didn't really change anything. That's the kind of gamer I am. I'd rather there be a story-based gameplay mechanic that has a great effect on it. And I understand the one in Resident Evil is not particularly long, but it's memorable to me because it made me think.
It has that tension of like
there's a point to it.
Something's walking slowly towards you, and you're just inching forward, just trying not to. Because I've played through that. I got the platinum trophy for that game, which means that bit, right? Invisible enemies.
Yeah. But there's a point to it, isn't it?
No save run as well. I had to do a no save run. That was like, nerve shot.
But that's my thing. It had that effect on it. Whereas I think if you in Metal Gear, and it might not be a fair comparison, I expect, completely understand that. Yeah. But in Metal Gear, if you fail at that mission, the only thing you could do is start all over again. So it's not really fun. It's just a exercise in monotony.
Well, I think like for example, if I was a game developer, right, back in 1998 when I was. Depending on when the game came out, I was either a fetus or I was just born. I would have done like maybe if you're going to do this card key mechanic, maybe it's a case of stealing them off the guards, or maybe, you know, like pickpocketing them, or like just But yeah, I completely agree. As much as Metal Gear Solid's one of my favorite franchises, but there's so many things you can criticize, or I'm just like, yep, 100%. Yeah, I agree.
And it's not just that. There's loads of other games that does something similar. It's just what came up today. I really enjoy the first Metal Gear. It's just like I feel with a lot of, say, for example, Halo and Gears of War. I also agree with that the gameplay started with the first game, and I think a lot of people afterwards, they go, oh, we can make a franchise out of this.
Yeah,
and the only thing they really built on. No, this is so difficult to word, but the only thing they really build on in the sequels to those games is more story at the forefront. They don't all really, especially Gears of War. Gears of War doesn't really change gameplay-wise at all throughout its first trilogy.
Yeah.
And I think Halo, for the most part, is a slightly different situation. That's also true. It's more, we've made a sequel now, we need to tell a new story. Gameplay is kind of locked in. Let's not worry about that. But when you're playing things, certain other franchises, like again your Donkey Kongs, your Sonics, Shantae, I think is a good one of that. Another good one like that. Gameplay kind of switches it up every time you go through a different game.
Yeah, I think I'd somewhat disagree with Metal Gear Solid in that sense, just because, like, for example, the third game, you're in a jungle and it's got survival mechanics, like you've got to scavenge animals and stuff to survive, and the whole thing's changed.
Oh yeah, sorry, I didn't mean like Metal Gear. I was more like
I understand what you mean. I think, yeah, I mean, this is getting into a entirely new conversation, but I think
we knew it would happen. We knew it would happen.
There's a certain not franchise fatigue. It's like the third game problem, right? Crash Bandicoot has it. Donkey Kong Country has it. I could think of plenty of other examples, but it's a problem where you have the first game comes out. First game is good, but it has a lot of flaws. Okay, so what do you do? Second game comes along. Improve on everything. Here's your checklist. This is what went wrong. Improve. Game's basically perfect. You've improved it as much as you can. So then the third game comes around. You can't improve the game anymore. So what do? You add stuff into it. You put in vehicle segments. You put in like all these other mechanics. You put in this. You put in that. You add more collectibles. You add more this. You add more that. And then you've got a game that's, yes, has got more to do than the second one, but is not quite as refined. Because when you've made the perfect game, where do you go from there? That's kind of the big question.
I think that's probably more to the fact these days, because people jump on franchises a lot quicker. But back in the 90s especially, the third game was always a big deal, because you've got Mario 3, Sonic 3.
Yeah.
I would say Street Fighter 3 is in there, even though people didn't know it back then.
Yeah.
How big of a change in the game that one was. People would, Zelda 3 is another example where they had the first Zelda, they went off the rails of the Adventure of Link and then came back on. A lot of people consider Zelda 3 to be the best in the series. I don't necessarily echo that, but what I mean is I think it depends on whether you were given the budget you wanted to make the game straight away, like your Halo 2s, your Gears of War 2s and stuff like that, or you had to wait a bit longer and work a bit harder to work out in a more confined space. But
yeah, I think we're talking about different eras of gaming, because I think when you bring up Mario and Zelda, then yeah, they have the make your first game, make your second game, it's completely different. Okay, we probably shouldn't have done that. Let's make the third game like the better version of the first.
Let's do what people. Technically, if you think about it that way, then maybe a lot of the threes are the twos, because especially with Mario,
yeah.
With Mario 2 in Japan, obviously it was just more of a harder version of the first game, and obviously over here it was a different game. Technically, Mario 3 is more of a Mario 2 than any of the others they made, so I get what you mean.
Yeah, I was thinking more like Crash Bandicoot Warped, for example. It's like Crash. It's Crash 2, exactly the same, except it's got vehicle segment. They've added vehicle segments where you're in a plane or where you're in, where they've just sort of added more, and that more, like back to what I said earlier, isn't as refined, therefore it's not as fun. Like that's why I love like the Crash trilogy, but if I replay one, it's always the second one because that's the one that's got the refined gameplay and it doesn't have any other gameplay styles that take away from that.
Yeah, there's a lot of examples like that. Like, I think people would say the Tomb Raider series follows what you're saying there. Batman Arkham games, everyone talks about too.
Yeah,
They don't
second one's
talk
my
about the
favourite of
others.
them.
Yeah. So I know what you mean.
Because I think the Batmobile was definitely what kind of brought that game down a little bit in terms of
Yeah, because they added more of stuff to try and make it bigger, and it
because
didn't.
what do you do when you've made like basically the perfect sequel? Where do you take it then? You can't necessarily go bigger because you're going to make an open world that's so big that nobody cares anymore. So the only thing you can do really is make a better story. I think that's the only way you can sort of take it.
That's bringing this back before we go on to our next question. That's where I think things like cool characters come into it.
Yeah.
If you've got a cool character on the back box art, a cool character in your manual and your advertising, taking that character and putting them into a different situation is enough to carry your next sequel. That's how they manage to do things. Like I think how Uncharted works.
Yeah.
Because a lot of people tend to think Uncharted 3 is. I think the hardcore fans think Uncharted 3 is probably the better one. But I don't know. That's kind of what I get the gist of.
Well, for me anyway, I think the general consensus with Uncharted is that the first one's the worst one, because which happens all the time in games. There's plenty of series where the first one's the worst just for being the first one, and then you've got the second one. For me, is the perfect blend of everything. It's got the perfect amount of gameplay. It's got the perfect amount of story. It's got the perfect blend. 3 is 2 again. It's like more of the same, and then 4 kind of took the Last of Us approach of focusing a lot more on story and a lot less on set pieces. So my favorite is the second one, just because it has a nice mix. But I'd say that they kind of, but yeah, it's hard discussion, like where you take a game next when it's you think you've made the perfect game.
Stay tuned. Something we'll cover on the podcast in the future, no doubt. Where do you take a game franchise? We should pick a load, Mike. We should pick a load of games and go, what would you do with this franchise next, and just see what we come up with. And they can pay us later. Pay us later.
Okay, here's an interesting question for you, Bill.
Okay.
What have games inspired you to do?
Well, games have played such a big part in my life, where you'd struggle when I was growing up to have a conversation with me without bringing in a game of any kind of mention. They were in everything. I drew all the characters. I wrote stories about them and everything growing up. So I was infatuated with them from a young age, for ages and ages. But I think when I started to mature and I got to a certain age where I was like, okay, what am I going to do with this? These games, they inspire me. They drive me. They've given me a certain set of skills that have helped me through my life, especially things like problem solving and all that kind of stuff. What can I do? Well, there's so many great stories and experiences that you have when you play games that I started to build my own world and wanting to build my own video game. And I think a lot of people who are gamers growing up go through that phase of, yeah, I could do this. I want to do this for all my life. Fast forward 10, 15 years, I got to the point where I was like, I don't think making a game at this stage is going to work. But I certainly do have the characters, the world, and everything else in my mind. Like if I had that, you have that budget and that team behind you, what you can make. So I started putting it down on paper and writing my own novel, inspired not just by video games, but also from Saturday morning cartoons and anime. pro wrestling and comic books, all of that kind of stuff, and sort of put it all into one place and said, right, I'm going to just write a novel. But much as those other things inspired me and motivated me to bring it all together, if it weren't for video games, I just don't think I would have the passion to sort of write a full novel, a series of novels that I have. So yeah, it's called Raging Destiny, and it's taken years to write. But if you did take the opportunity to read it, you would probably, and you've enjoyed it, you would have to thank my love of video games for about 60-70% of what was in there, because that's what video games has made me do, sort of sit down and sort of create my own world. So what about you, Mike?
Well, I won't go through the whole my whole life story, but I got into games a lot.
Like me, you mean?
Hey you! Yeah, you! Do you like video games? Do you like kick-ass characters? Do you like action and adventure? Then you should go to RagingDestiny.com and get your copy of Raging Destiny, an action-packed fantasy fiction today. A novel written by a gamer for a gamer. That's right, written by me, Bill, from Pop Culture Pause Screen. It's a non-stop thrill ride with in-depth characters that very well could be your next favourite franchise. There isn't any slowing down in this book, oh no! Every chapter is designed to keep you reading and wanting to know what happens next. You can find out more at RagingDestiny.com, and I thank you in advance for your support. Now, back to the show.
That wasn't a jab, I swear.
Try to keep the gloves up, Mike. Jeez.
But I didn't play video games growing up and when I did play video games, it was a very mainstream sort of I don't want to say gamer because I hate that term, but I guess it's what games have inspired me to do. I think the most passionate thing the thing that makes me most passionate, and one of the reasons why I wake up each day, is because I make this content on YouTube, a series of videos. My main series, for example, is called No-Stalgia, where I look at games I didn't grow up with to determine if they still hold up today. And because I didn't grow up with games, often my opinion is quite unbiased, I like to think. Other than my sort of general likes and dislikes of games over the years. But I always give a game a chance. And I think one of the games that inspired me to start this whole channel, really, which you'd think it would be one of my favourite games of all time, considering how much it inspired me, but it really isn't. And that's The Legend of Zelda Ocarina of Time. Now, when I got a Switch, first ever Nintendo console, got Switch, got Breath of the Wild, tried Breath of the Wild, I really enjoyed it, and I thought, you know what? Let's see what else this series has got to offer. So I looked up top Zelda games. Top Zelda game was always, no matter what happened, Ocarina of Time. Everyone was like, Ocarina of Time, best game ever made. Oh my god, it's incredible. I thought, alright, this game must be worth playing. And then when it came to describing why this is one of the best games of all time, it started with a story of how someone had a little twinkle in her eye, and they got a Nintendo 64 at the bottom of the Christmas tree, and they got a copy of Ocarina of Time, and how, oh my god, this is my childhood game. And I thought, yeah, but take that childhood element out of it. Why is it a good game? And I don't feel like I got that response from people. So I thought,
there's quite a lot of those people as well that have not actually finished the game, and it's like, if that was that game, if that was that good, how come you didn't finish it then? But it's like, I know what you mean.
I mean, it's also like a game I don't feel like you'd find yourself replaying endlessly either. But no. I think Ocarina of that game inspired me because it made me think, kind of want to dig for the truth of how good games are with that nostalgic element taken out, and I felt like I was sort of in the perfect opportunity that I felt like I could talk about them in my videos. And I think, but other than that, I think it's also, video games have also inspired me more to connect in my relationship, and with someone who grew up with the GameCube. we find ourselves playing stuff like Mario Party and Mario Kart, and I think that connection has definitely meant a lot to me. And I've been working with yourself, Bill, and other people that we sort of associated with on a series that we worked on, where we all played kart racing games together, and that was such a fun experience. And I know if I wasn't playing games, I would completely miss out on those experiences. And I think that's a really cool thing. I think that's one thing that people don't talk about as much about video games. You can talk about gameplay mechanics, you can talk about music, you can talk about all this different stuff, but the most important thing about games is their ability to bring people together, and their ability to, create friendships, create, jobs for people, create worlds that people get to envelop. I think, there's nothing more fun than sitting down on a sofa with a controller in each hand and just playing games together. So I think on the whole, games have been pretty inspirational for me.
Yeah, and I tend to agree. I think if I didn't have something like video games to give me that kind of inspiration to stand up in front of a crowd and talk about the games I like and why, and sort of look at the gaming landscape and just ignore. I think another thing about it was that there's people have a lot of passion for video games, sometimes to a fault, where, like you say, not picking on those people that love Zelda. I love Zelda as much as everybody else, but you take a game from your childhood and you say, this game is the best ever game ever. And they will argue that point to a point of madness where it doesn't make any kind of sense because that's their childhood, and that's fine. But I think games, because I've played so many different types of games, they inspired me to sort of stand up again, start my own YouTube channel and work with people like yourself, work with the OLL community, the One Life Left community, and sort of become a personality to sort of say, you don't have to be so standoffish. And just because you've played one game in a genre and that's the only one you've played, that you think that's the best one, and if someone says, actually, that's rubbish compared to that, you don't need to be either one of those people. You don't need to be a person that will say, this is the only game I've ever played, so it's got to be the best. But you also don't need to be that guy who's played so many games and say, you just don't know any better. I've been inspired by video games to sort of stand up and go, no, you don't need to do that. Anybody can love games, and there's nothing wrong with that. It's perfectly fine to love what you love. But at the same time, if I didn't have the knowledge base and the different types of games I played, I wouldn't have the confidence to be, on this podcast, standing and stream on Twitch for OLL Games and sort of say that you just, be a decent human being, but respect other people's opinions on games at the same time. I don't think I can do that with any other subject,
Yeah, I can understand that. I think it's, there's something beautiful about games where we all get like pent up, and it's nice to be able to just sort of vent about things. I think that's another thing. Like it's nice just to be able to talk about something that I'm passionate about, and I think it's very important that we can just talk about it and let off our experiences and our feelings and all these other things. Like, I think that's really important.
Well, it's like also like the characters you come across in video games. You playing as Street Fighter was a big inspiration on me. Where although there's so much little bits of personality in a Street Fighter character, where you almost learn their fighting style with them when you play that game. And playing Street Fighter and playing characters like Ken from Street Fighter, when I complete his game and he's talking about training and getting better and getting stronger and that kind of stuff, that made me want to go study martial arts myself. And I probably wouldn't have ever done that. I wouldn't have looked into it, because it was kind of like, me learning all of Ken's kicks and punches and learning all of his quarter towards fireballs and super moves, seeing that come off, and in his story talking about how he trained to get stronger and things like that. I wouldn't have never thought that was a thing until I played those kind of games. And again, that inspired me after going and doing martial arts and doing that side of part of my life to then go, okay, games gave me this character that I could relate to and set me off on this good path. I want to create my own characters and share that with the world, and also pass those stories down. That's why I wrote my own book. So it's a knock-on effect that just it seems so strange looking at it and sort of labeling it and saying it out loud is kind of like, really? That's from video games? But yeah, I'm confident that is the fact, because it's a domino effect. Something that radiates with you so much when you're playing it, when you're growing up, that has a knock-on effect that makes you do something, and then you look at it and you go, why am I doing this? It's because of these experiences I had with video games. So,
do you think that playing sort of those experiences like Street Fighter was like, do you think playing through like Street Fighter for the first time or trying to learn all those combos, do you think that was something that made you realize that it was a media that you really sort of fell in love with?
Yeah, I think there was more to it than that. Because when I first started playing things like Street Fighter, it was all very much kind of everyone was just hammering the buttons. People do it with Tekken, they do it with all fighting games. They get the controller, they hammer all the buttons, and then someone wins at the end.
Yeah,
When I was looking at it, and after playing things like Mario, where there's set game design on how you get from the end of the level to the beginning, I was like, there must be more to this. And for the longest time, I thought when you throw a fireball in Street Fighter, that was like random chance. It wasn't until I went into the arcade where someone said, no, you do this, and showing me the motions. I was like, whoa! And then I thought, oh, that must just be the arcade. I went home and tried it at home, and then I fired my first fireball in Street Fighter, and I was like, there's more to it than this. And then I started learning the mechanics and reading up about it in the instruction manuals, bought the game myself, went into training mode, started studying what you have to do to play the game. And that level of depth made me go, okay, games aren't just something that you press a few buttons and you get it done. It's a learning experience. And I want to be able to not only learn it so I can beat everybody in my friends, which was the original drive for it, but I also want to teach them, so then we can have matches, because if they know what they're doing and I know what they're doing, we're going to have more epic fights. And it's that kind of level of depth that sort of got me rooted into games.
I think it's moments like playing in the Street Fighter arcade cabinet and stuff like that is like something that really sort of sticks in your mind, and it really sort of makes you realize that games are just so incredible. Like, I think about specific moments that relate to me. It's almost like it's gonna sound really stupid, but like the first game I ever 100% got 100% in was Lego Star Wars on the PS2.
Wow, man, you got all those blocks and everything.
Yeah, I got all the mini kit. I had my mum sitting next to me on the PC, like reading a walkthrough, going, "Oh, you got to go to this bit," and I go, "Oh, thanks, mum." Like, honestly, like that was the first game I ever 100%ed, and like when I was messing around with all the cheats, and I'd like hit a box, and because I had like times like whatever multiplier on, like the numbers would rack up. And I think being able to, it's like, obviously people love games that I'm very different to how some people play games. Some people would like to just play a game for like hundreds of hours, but I like the mindset of I have conquered everything about this game. This game is done. I'm the master of it. And I think moments like that really stick with me. And it's also like I remember when I first played, The Last of Us, the gameplay I didn't think was amazing, but like when I first went through that story, it's kind of, everyone's played it now, so it's kind of lost its luster a little bit. But when I first played through that story, I really sat back and just thought, like, wow, this is incredible. Like, this was before I played like earlier, games like your Metal Gear Solids and your Chrono Triggers. So at the time, I didn't think video game stories were particularly well written. So when I played The Last of Us, I sort of just sat back and thought, wow, video games really can have deep, well-written characters, multi-layered, and have their own sort of minds and their own sort of personalities. I think that's one thing that really stuck with me. And I think when it comes to just like when I first played through Metal Gear Solid 3 for the first time, I was just taken aback by just how much these games have held up. And I think that's the most rewarding thing about what I do and my channel and just my general mindset toward like retro games is every game that I play and I enjoy, people have been enjoying it for years, and that sort of feeling of, wow, this really does hold up. This is not something that some 30-40-year-old man is like harboring, like, oh, that was, play it back in the day. No, today this game is fantastic and you should definitely play it. That's amazing, because if you can make a timeless game, that's really something special. Would you say there's anything sort of stuck with you from?
Yeah, but just to touch on that point that you just mentioned, that was one of the biggest reasons I was attracted to your channel when I first came across it, when you first dropped your first video way back in the day in the OLL Discord.
Yeah.
And I was like, yeah, I'll give it a go, I'll check it out. The way that it was so refreshing, because I feel that sometimes I'm fighting to sort of say it's not just nostalgia. These are good. There's a reason they've stayed with me all this time.
Yeah.
There's a reason I love these soundtracks. I love these characters, and they haven't faded away. So to hear someone who's had no previous experience about it, and objectively, that's the key word here, objectively looking at it with no rose-tinted glasses and just going in and saying, look, what's the good, what's the bad? Let's just lay it on the table, put the cards on the table, and sort of stripping back the reasons of why is this game still good today, and here's the reasons why I think it is.
Yeah.
You get to the end of the video, you're saying that why it's good as you go, but then you finalize it by saying this game is still good because, and it's almost like all those people that were defending that game who said, oh yeah, it's good because I played it back in the day, or I remember this Christmas morning, like you were saying.
It was influential, or because it was the first of its kind.
That kind of stuff. You're ignoring all of that, and you're going straight into it, and you're saying, this game is good, even if you play it now, because. Whereas there's certain games like a certain infamous Croc game I think you played like a little bit of.
Yeah, that was awful.
Yeah, that might have been one of the first platformers, and that might have been good back then. But you're saying that doesn't matter now. That's not in the argument. That's what it is. But anyway, like you say, going back onto what you were saying about something that specifically made me realise I love the genre. It has to be with Mario and me just getting grips as a 4-year-old playing Super Mario Brothers 1, and not getting past the first or second level for ages, and almost giving up because I was like, But when my dad came down, when I came down from in the morning one day, my dad said, I got onto this next level, and there's these flying fish, and then after that there's a fire-breathing dragon in a lava cave, and my little 4-year-old mind's like, what? You mean there's something to look at besides this, just the grass level and the underground level? And it's that drive of seeing what a game has to offer next that made me realize that this is a media I will always love. Because I can watch a movie, I could play a game, play a board game or get involved in the sport. And there will be those moments, don't get me wrong. But video games do it more often, more regular, and if a game is done well, I know that if I give it time, I will eventually see something new and different, and I will be rewarded for my skill. And I think the ultimate moment of that is Mario Brothers 2, believe it or not, because I was that obsessed with the first one. I had to get the next one, and it's Mario Brothers 2 I stuck with, because as a kid, I really didn't like that game because it was so different to the original Mario Brothers. But we only got like one game a year, so I chose it and I had to stick with it.
Yeah.
But that last boss on Mario Brothers 2 took me completely out of left field, where I came in to the last boss arena in Mario Brothers 2 and this music hit. and the music is so ominous and different and cool. And again, it was that moment of, you've stuck with this game right to the end, and now we're going to give you a cool boss arena, cool boss fight. And my heart was like beating out of my chest, and I was like, I don't get this with anything else.
No.
There's nothing else that does this to me. And it's the payoff of, you won't see the end unless you get good enough, but if you do, it's going to be worth it.
Well, I think it's like more recent example. I played the game that was 2019's Game of the Year, Sekiro: Shadows Die Twice, made by the Dark Souls team. That was and still is one of the hardest games I have ever played. I shouted, I screamed, I wanted to pull my hair out, but there was when I beat, there was the final boss for sure, but there was definitely one particular boss that when I beat it for the first time in my entire life, as my as someone who plays games, I literally like screamed like really loud. It was almost like a primal roar. Like I was just like, I beat that boss, and I would literally like, I've got a bit of a short fuse, so I was literally go in, play it for an hour, turn it off. Next day, go in, play it for an hour, turn it off. Next day, go in for an hour, turn it off. Literally day in, day out. And I got in there, and I got so good at that boss fight that when I beat it, I literally like erupted. Went, yes! Oh my god! And I was just that. I think that's what games do that you won't get from watching a film or a TV show or listening to music. That sort of, I have just overcome something that like may not mean something to someone else, but for me, someone who's been trying to do this over and over again, it's just really rewarding, which is another reason why I don't understand. Like, I wouldn't want to play a game on the easiest difficulty and just cruise through, because that element of challenge, that nice in-between point between I want to kill something and I want to, and like, that nice little bit between really tough but like not BS levels of you just hitting your face against the wall. Like,
yeah, I'm kind of in the middle on that one. I think I've played a lot. There was a time in my life where I would play everything on the hardest skill up because I had to prove a point.
yeah,
And then there was a time in my life where I felt I'm playing these hard games and they're taking my time away from being able to play all these other experiences.
yeah.
So it was like, I don't care. I'll just play it on the easiest skill level because I just want to get through as many games as I possibly can.
Yeah.
I think at the stage in my life I am right now, I don't like a game that's far too hard, that's going to take up my time for no other reason, just to have an achievement or something on the list.
I can understand that. Yeah.
Yeah. So I'll play a game up until a point where the fun stops.
Yeah.
So if the fun, it's like that for you. If the fun stops, then stop.
Yeah.
So a game will last as long for me for when I'll play the story through, the one player. I'll then go for things like the unlocks if they're fun to unlock. New characters, new options, new chapters to play, secret endings, that kind of stuff. The multiplayer in some cases, depending on if it's worth the time and it doesn't feel like a different game. It's the one player kind of contributed towards me getting good at the multiplayer kind of thing. Yeah. And then if I need to increase my skill, so I could play Donkey Kong Country over and over again, because when I first played that game, I felt it was really tough. But now I go back and I know so much about that game, I'm happy to run through it because it just feels fun to play. Now, when you say things like it can't be too easy, I'm going back to what I was saying about Mario 2 or even Mario 1. The game can be easy so long as what I'm seeing next is fun and different. Yeah. If I'm playing a easy game and nothing changes every level, or I'm playing like an easy RPG where I'm seeing my stats go up and I'm still hitting the same enemies I did in level 1, absolutely, I agree with you. But if it's something like, and I'm not saying necessarily it's easy, but Donkey Kong Tropical Freeze, that game, I think, is the perfect example of the more time you put into that game, the more gaming experiences you get out of it. The levels are all very inventive when things are coming out of the background, where they change the color set when it's like just the shadows.
Yeah.
Where you're one moment it's all a forest or a jungle, and then some of the late levels you're just in fruit in the sky. You're in factories, and when I'm playing through a level in Donkey Kong Tropical Freeze, and I see what is this? I'm in some sort of factory, and then I see it's juicing fruit, and you're just going along the rails, and by the end of it, you see all these contraptions that are like boxing up stuff and sending them away. That for me was so powerful. So I agree with you, but if a game is really easy and I get to see that kind of stuff, I could play easy games to the end of the days.
I think for me, it's what is the best difficulty for the best gaming experience. And I think people say that's a very subjective thing, and I can understand that. But for me, like, take a game like Doom Eternal, for example. Mm-hmm. If you play that game on the easiest difficulty, which, you can do, that game is boring. And also, more important thing than it being boring, because I know that's subjective, but this is a bit factual, that you will not get the most out of the mechanics if you play it on the easiest difficulty. And Doom Eternal is one of the... If you... Like, when I first played it, I think, the second down from the hardest difficulty. So it was challenging, but I didn't feel like it was too much. And I really came to grips with the mechanics. And when I did, it genuinely became I honestly think it is one of the finest crafted first-person shooters I have ever played, because when you put the time in and get used to those mechanics, it was the same with Sekiro. You really understand how good it is, and I think that's the most important thing. It's not that every game has to be hard or every game has to be easy. It's a simple thing of the game is as difficult as it needs to be for the mechanics to shine the most.
Yes,
I think that's the most important.
Yeah, and I think there's some examples of, like, if you're not with the understanding of what we potentially mean by that, I'll throw in some examples. I really liked Destiny when it first came out. I played that for several months. But when I go back to, like, when how much of a game do I play? When I was seeing my friends spend hours on one mission to get one bit of armor on a dice roll, just to make them play the same mission again, but slightly easier because they've got better equipment. And all they really do were looking at things to cheese the mechanics. So Destiny is a first-person shooter, obviously. When the AI is so unfair that if you're in a standard one-on-one fight with them and you're facing that person, and they will kill you 50 times quicker than you will be able to kill them. And the only real solid concrete way of achieving it is to hide behind a rock where the AI doesn't quite see you and doesn't move, and you're just shooting in one direction for ages and ages, watching that life bar goes down bit by bit, pip by pip for about an hour, just to potentially get a bit of armor that might make the game easier next time you come and play it. That is when I clock off. That's when I'm like, no, that's not what I feel games was about. The fun has stopped now for me, so I won't be getting that super armor, and I'm okay with that.
It's like Uncharted. If you play Uncharted on the hardest difficulty, which I've done, I've played through all of them. I've got the platinums for all Uncharted games, right? Uncharted on the hardest difficulty.
I feel like you were asking for a round of applause there. I'm sorry. All
right, yeah. Send me the bill. It's fine. Uncharted on the hardest difficulty is so unfun to play. It's so unfun to play because the game, when you're playing it through on like an easy difficulty or a normal difficulty, you're jumping, you're punching, you're swinging around, you're diving left here, there, and everywhere, and the gameplay is fun. It's fun to play. But then you play it on the hardest difficulty and you're inching forward, like always stuck behind cover. Everyone's throwing like 50 grenades at you, and you just, at that point, it's less of you like the skill. You have to obviously get more skill to beat it, but there was never. there's two kinds of I've just beaten a difficult challenge. There's the yes, wow, I can't believe I've done it. Like I feel so gratified. And then there's the I've been chipped away so much that all you do is just let out a little sigh and just feel a little bit sad.
Yeah, or you've spent 20 minutes, maybe even an hour sometimes, going through a really difficult level, inching inch by inch, because you know if you run in, the AI is going to kill you instantly, and then you get right near the end, and then suddenly the game just kills you through some sort of trap, or you get a random grenade that blows you up.
Yeah.
That not and you get sent all the way back to start all over again. You know, that's not fun for me. That's more where the game's unfair on purpose, and the only reason you're playing is for bragging rights.
Well, the difficulty setting at that point becomes just number tweaking, as opposed to catering the difficulty. Like Doom Eternal, for example, the director of Doom Eternal says that his favourite way to play the game is on the hardest difficulty, because he's made the game mechanics fun enough that it can it can stand on its own on that difficulty. Not that that's the best way to play.
When you look at something like Ninja Gaiden, even like the 2D one, the original Ninja Gaiden and Ninja Gaiden Black and stuff, I played those. I played Ninja Gaiden Black on the hardest skill level and hated every second of it. But I just at that time wanted to say I'm a real hardcore gamer and I completed Ninja Gaiden on the hardest skill level. Blah blah blah. And well done me. But I didn't enjoy it, and I almost every time I say it, you heard it in the tone of my voice. I sicken myself. And if you that's the reason you play games, and I've got many friends that do that. Power to you. But for me, I felt Ninja Gaiden. I almost look at that game and I get thrown back to that time when I tried to do it on the hardest skill level, and it almost puts me off playing the game. And that's what I mean. I will stop playing a game when it stops being fun. I don't enjoy playing a game to the point just to say I've done everything, and then I find that game has been ruined for me because I've played it in a way that has handicapped me so much that I didn't enjoy it.
Thanks for listening to the Pop Culture Pausecast. Check the channel for other episodes, new podcast every Wednesday. Or, if you're one of the cool ones, you can watch some of my other videos right here on Pop Culture Pause Screen, or maybe catch me live on Twitch every Monday from 7 PM UK time. And show some love to my partner in crime, Mike, over at his YouTube channel, Mike Ritiques. Link in the description. He does some great game reviews, he really does. And if you want some action, adventure and kick-ass characters in your life, then go over to RagingDestiny.com and get a copy of my book, Raging Destiny, a novel for gamers written by me, a gamer. You won't regret it, and I appreciate your support. That's RagingDestiny.com. You should have links to all of this in the description below, or on screen now for you to click. But for now, it's time to stop talking and go play some bloody video games. Catch you next time.